You have probably all seen viral videos that go something like this. Somebody walks into a store and let's just say it's a he, is not wearing a mask and everyone else in the store is. And one of the employees of the store, a minimum wage clerk, of course, comes up and very politely and respectfully asks the man to put on a mask, maybe even offers him one free of charge. And of course, it is that sets the guy off. And I mean, we've all heard the speech in some form at this point. You know how it goes. Oh, I am not going to put on one of your stupid masks, he says. I know the truth. I know that this virus is nothing but a hoax. I know that it was all cooked up by Bill Gates and George Soros in a laboratory in Wuhan, China, for the purpose of making sure that everyone would be implanted with a microchip when they get the vaccination. I know that the number of cases has been artificially inflated, that the deaths are not real. I know that this virus has been caused by the erection of 5G towers. And I know, above all, that you want me to put on one of your masks so it cuts off the oxygen to my brain and keeps me from seeing the truth. Well, you're not going to get me to put on a mask, and you're not going to force me to take one of your vaccinations, because I know my rights. I also know that the vaccination is the mark of the beast, and if I get one, I'll never get into heaven. I know that I don't need a mask and I don't need a shot because Jesus is enough to protect me, and I know you cannot deny me my religious freedom. Like I say, we've all heard talk like that. We've all seen videos or heard reports. How do we react? Well, a lot of us react with anger, with frustration, for some pretty good reason. I mean, people who have those kinds of attitudes, who act in that way, are making this whole pandemic situation worse. We're also aware that if too many people listen to those kinds of weird ideas, we're not going to get enough people vaccinated. And thus we will not achieve the herd immunity that we really need to get out of this thing. And I suspect a lot of us also feel a certain level of embarrassment when people bring up their Christian affiliation and their beliefs. Kind of embarrassing to know that there are Christians who believe such things, who use their faith to justify such irresponsible behavior. Why would you want to be associated with people who do things like that? So there are strong emotional reactions, understandably, but apart from the emotional reaction, I think we also need to think practically about people who talk in this way. There is too much that is too problematic in some of the ideas that are going around. And what can we do about it? What kind of response can make a positive difference? Well, take a moment to listen to one of these diatribes, because there's something going on in them, something that is important. When people say things like that, they generally are talking about what they know. They know things about the pandemic. They know things about the vaccine and about certain political agendas. Most of all, they know things that you don't know. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, but what they know isn't true. It is based on half-truths and distortions and fantasies. But you see, on a certain level, it doesn't matter because they know it. They have access to what they perceive to be secret knowledge. And that leads to the inevitable result that they are puffed up with that knowledge. See, knowledge, especially secret knowledge, is quite a drug. It doesn't matter who you are, or it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, well-educated, or a school dropout. If you have secret knowledge, well, you can see yourself as better than everybody else. And so if people have what they feel is secret knowledge, they can feel justified to do things that are socially or morally unacceptable because they know things that other people don't know. And of course, this doesn't just apply to conspiracy theories about the pandemic, but also, as we've seen, to conspiracy theories about elections and QAnon and other things. In many ways, this whole idea of secret knowledge is one of the main problems we seem to be facing as a society at this particular moment. So it would be really, really helpful to find some way to counter such a dangerous trend. They were actually having the same kind of problem in the church in Corinth in our reading this morning from Corinthians. Now, they weren't arguing over masks, but they were arguing about meat. See, in ancient times, they didn't have grocery stores. They didn't have butcher shops like we do. In the ancient world, there was generally just one place you could go, one place to get meat. All of the animals that were slaughtered in the city were slaughtered as sacrifices in temples dedicated to various gods. Now, fortunately, the gods really didn't require much meat to eat. Generally, the gods were only given the parts of the animals that people couldn't eat, like the bones and the fat and certain organs. This is what was burnt up on the altars. But the rest of the meat, that was available to be eaten. Now, most of it was eaten by the worshippers themselves, but a generous portion was given to the priests, who had so expertly slaughtered and butchered the animals. And what the priests and the families couldn't eat themselves, they generally sold out the back door of the temple. And that meant that the only meat you could buy in a city like Corinth came from the temples of various pagan gods. And there were some Christians in Corinth who knew something. They knew that since they had decided to follow Jesus, they weren't supposed to have anything to do with any other gods. And so these Christians vowed that they would never eat meat again. And what's more, they denounced and argued with other Christians who did eat meat because they knew that those other Christians were honoring strange gods by doing so. But here is where the problem got a bit complicated. These other Christians, the ones who were eating meat, they also had knowledge. They knew that pagan gods like Zeus and Apollo and Dionysus weren't real. And if they weren't real, if they were nothing but idols, well, what did it matter if the hamburger I wanted to eat for supper was originally dedicated to a fake god before it got butchered? And so these Christians, based on what they knew, just went ahead and ate their burgers with a clear conscience. So in this church in Corinth, there were two groups of Christians. Both were sure that they knew better than the others. And they were arguing with each other on this basis. And obviously this continual claim heard from both sides, we know the truth, was not making things better. It was only making things worse. And Paul heard about what was going on, and in his letter, he attempted to guide the Christians in Corinth out of what had become a dead-end argument. And it's in this context that Paul offers up some profound but very simple advice. Knowledge puffs up, he says, but love builds up. Paul understands, of course, that knowledge is good. Knowledge, especially knowledge based on good evidence and sound reasoning, can lead us towards all truth. But he also understood that knowledge has the effect of puffing people up. Paul knew that when people argue over who knows best, all they really accomplish is puffing themselves up while they seek to deflate others by proving their knowledge is unsound. And the problem is that in an argument like that, nobody wins, and people can only lose. See, if you're convinced that you know something that somebody else doesn't know, whether that knowledge is sound or not, it does have the effect of making you feel puffed up, better than others. But the other person also feels puffed up because they think they know best. And so in the argument that follows, you might think you're arguing over facts and evidence, but that's not usually what's really going on. People generally only argue in order to feel good about themselves, in order to continue to feel puffed up, in order to feel more puffed up. And when that's all that it's about, well, the whole argument ends up being a lot of hot air. Knowledge puffs up. And so knowledge alone is rarely able to resolve these kinds of disputes. And so Paul counsels the Corinthians to take another course, the way of love. He's telling them that while they will not win the others over with facts, they may win them over with love. Now, what he's asking, of course, is hardly easy. It is way it's way harder to love someone that you disagree with than it is to argue with them. And he even suggests that out of love, you may even feel the need to compromise and bend. But he argues it's actually the only way that you might change the toxic circumstances in which you find yourself. Now, I don't really want to go into all of the specific advice that Paul gives to resolve the specific situation in Corinth. But what I would like to do is to take his basic principles and apply them to some of the toxicity we see in our society today, in these divisive times. If you have people in your life that you care for who have fallen into dangerous or destructive conspiracy theories, secret knowledge, you've probably already figured out that there is little to no point in arguing with these people over the facts. When people are puffed up with knowledge, Paul is right, that almost never works. But the result is, of course, that we tend to not engage. When we see some sort of conspiracy theory, crazy conspiracy posted in social media, what do? We just scroll on by. Oh, I'm not daring to comment on that. We may even start to block people out of our social networks. Sometimes we even feel like we have to block people we love right out of our lives. And there is some rationality to that response, of course, because it is true that there is little to no point in engaging on such a level, the level of knowledge. But that doesn't mean that there is nothing that we can do. There are some things that we can do. First of all, there is a time and there is a place to challenge false knowledge when we encounter it. When you see, for example, a social media post, a fake social media post, there can be a place to respectfully offer up a different point of view and back it up with some facts. But understand there's only one reason to do so. You are unlikely to change somebody's mind if they are all puffed up on knowledge. But by not allowing the falsehood to stand unchallenged, you may prevent it from spreading further by making sure that somebody else who hasn't yet bought into the secret knowledge doesn't see it without it being challenged. So you can post facts, but honestly, then it is probably best not to engage further. Where you can engage, where you can make a difference for those who have fallen into false knowledge, is really only if you engage in love. And that's not easy. That is a lot of work. It may mean you have to make the effort to really try and understand What's going on in somebody's life? What is making them seek meaning or purpose in what they see as secret knowledge? It may mean engaging their fears or their hatreds from a loving point of view. That is not an easy thing for anyone to do. But what Paul seems to be telling us is that it's really the only path to real change. You know, there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks about some people actually finally giving up on certain conspiracy theories. You know, the people who believed in QAnon and related election conspiracy theories, they were so certain, so absolutely certain that Joe Biden would never become president of the United States. The mere fact that that has actually now happened, well, that has actually led to some of them to do some soul searching. Some of them are asking themselves whether or not they might have been duped. This is a promising development, of course, and it's hard to know where it might lead. But I'll tell you one thing. If all of the people who begin to question the false knowledge that they were so certain was true are only met with derision and a massive chorus of, "We told you so," well, chances are that they will only retreat back into old certainties, or maybe that they will find new conspiracy theories to hold on to. But if, on the other hand, they are met with some compassion, if they're met with some understanding, if they're met with some love, as costly and difficult as that may be, what are the possibilities then? Because yes, knowledge does puff up, but love builds up. Let's pray. Oh Lord our God, on some level, I think we're all dealing with people, someplace in our life, in our encounters, people who are puffed up on, well, false knowledge. Help us to learn how to engage, not by fighting on the level of knowledge, which probably is not going to lead to anything, but to engage with some love and some compassion and care, because we do believe what you say, that only love can transform. Amen.